Good evening, everyone. It is actually past 6:15, but we're good. I believe everybody's here but one, and we're just going to get started. If everyone would please stand with me, and we will say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This meeting is a meeting of the school board and public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. Opportunities for public participation will be permitted in accordance with policy 167.3. And does anybody have anything or any comments before we begin?
We did not have anybody sign up.
Oh, okay. All right. And then I will hand it over to Dr. Arthur.
Thank you very much. A couple things I want to say before we get started. Probably back away from my phone a little bit. In front of you, there's a gift bag. We just wanted to say a sincere thanks for you taking your evening tonight, spending some time with us and with Dr. Adamson to learn more about board protocol and those kinds of things. So I wanted to just recognize your commitment and your excitement for becoming a part of our school board. So there's a gift bag right in front of you. Additionally, you should have a pad of paper. Feel free to take notes. If you want to collect some thoughts or what have you, take those with you as well. What I'd like to do just real quickly, I'm going to ask Mr. Butler if he'll just kind of hold off and get to you. But if we could maybe start with Mr. Lips and go around the table, and if you could introduce yourself and just give maybe a sentence or two about why you're either running for the board or why you ran for the board.
My name our district for 46 years at Martinsville High School. Have a vested interest in our school district. I think it's a great place to live. We've lived here my entire adult life, and I want to continue being a part of the school district.
Thanks, sir. Jackie.
Nope, sorry.
I'm going to make him go last.
Thank you. I'm Jackie Decker, and I have lived here my entire life as well. I used to work here at the school corporation. So, and I have two grandsons that go here. I have a husband that still teaches here, great nieces and nephews. So I also want to be part of the school district. I want to give back to the school corporation. And this is my home. This is my community, and I want to give back.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie Lips, and I'm finishing my 4th year on the board. I'm a retired elementary principal, and I know the school system as a parent, as an administrator, as a teacher, and as a friend to everybody. I love the school, I love the kids, and I've always felt that it takes a village to educate our kids, and I want very much to continue to be a part of that village and the leadership and do everything I can to make this the best place for our kids, because that's why we're here.
Thank you.
I'm Heather Staggs. I also pretty much born and raised here. I always joke we tried to move away for a couple of years and we came right back. This is where we love being. This is our home. Two kids graduated from here, 2 currently enrolled. And we just always kind of strive to get back, and I thought this is the best way I can for our district.
Great, thank you.
My name is Brandy Dean, and I have lived in Martinsville all of my life. I have been a parent volunteer within the school district for over 15 years. My husband has been a teacher at the school district for 35 years. We've had 7 children and 1 grandchild in the school district. And I'm just hoping to be a voice for our vocational students and to help the students who are willing and want to find trade skill jobs, as long as with helping all students in our district.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Matt Hankins. I am been a resident of Martinsville all my life. I was born and raised here. My 2 children graduated from Martinsville in 2009, 2011. I have been teaching for 34 years. I retired here in 2017. Thought I was finished. I've been teaching the last 4 years, it's been great, love it. I want to do what's best for students, and I'm a tech advisor, so I'm an advocate for vocational education as well. And I want to see Martinsville continue to succeed in the future.
Thank you.
I'm Dave Reinhardt, finishing up a first term on the school board, running for re-election. Graduate of Martinsville High School like many, and 3 children graduated from here, and I live here in the community, love the community. When I ran 4 years ago, I used the term, it's all about the kids, and I still believe it's all about the kids, and also use a term we use in Lions Club, and that is we serve. And I feel like I'm just a servant to our community and serving to make our school corporation better. And thank you very much.
And my name is Michelle Baugh, and in December it will be 6 years I've been on the school board. And I have one that just graduated in 2020, the COVID year. And then I have 2 that are currently in the school system. My objective, my goal, my agenda has always been the kids and to be their advocate. And that's what I've just always stuck with, and that's what I'm gonna always stick with. So I'm here for the kids.
Michael Adamson, I'm the Director of Board Services at the Indiana School Boards Association. I've been with ISBA for 14 years. It's a second half career for me. I retired from General Motors after a little more than 31 years of service there before starting with ISBA. I have probably one of the greatest jobs anybody could possibly have. I get to drive all over the state of Indiana and meet with school boards and work with them on roles, responsibilities, and a variety of other activities. I also served as an elected school board member in the Avon Community School Corporation for 20 years. So, good to be here. Pleasure to meet all of you.
You should get a really big award for that. That's a lot of dedication. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Mr. Buckler?
My name is Craig Buckler, and this is the middle of my second year as assistant superintendent here for the MSD of Martinsville. Previous to that, I spent 18 years in Beach Grove, 7 as a classroom teacher and 11 as a building principal. And before that, I worked in Park Pleasant Schools at Berkeley Elementary for 5 years as an elementary teacher. My undergrad degree is in elementary education from Ball State. My master's is in educational leadership from Indiana University, and my EDS is from Indiana State University in school administration, and I got that at the same time I was participating in the the Indiana Principals Leadership Institute. So that's just a little bit about me.
Thanks, sir. Jay Arthur, Superintendent, of course. I just want to, again, say thank you for being here and your willingness to be with us tonight. A couple things about me. Prior to being in Martinsville, sort of started at the beginning of my career. I started received my bachelor's in elementary education and special education severe disabilities. I went on to teach students with significant disabilities. My first teaching job in Lawrence Township. Left Lawrence Township to go back to Ball State again. Got my master's degree in counseling psych. Got a master's degree from IUPUI as a director of special education. So that was my administration side. Went back to Lawrence Township, taught some more. Left Lawrence Township to go to the Indiana Department of Education for a year. Politics were not my thing in terms of working for the state of Indiana, so that lasted a year, and I got right back into public school again. So leaving the Department of Education, I went to Pike Township, worked within the central office there for a handful of years as a special education administrator. Left Pike Township to go to Carmel, spent the next 11 years in Carmel as the director of special education, director of student services, and anything else they asked me to do. So it's a great jumping off point for moving into a superintendency. My particular position was a direct report to the superintendent as director of student services, so I felt like most of the time I was an assistant superintendent doing assistant superintendent kinds of work. So it offered a great road for me as I moved into superintendency, and was very appreciative. Last June, or last May, I guess it would be, this board afforded me an opportunity to be hired here in Martinsville, and I appreciate that opportunity, and I feel like we've done some really great things in a really short, hard period of time. And so I'm excited to continue doing more things as we move forward. Before we move into Mr. Adamson's presentation, again, thanks for being here. I want to read a couple of things just to kind of give you guys some background on where we are, because I feel like there's some things that perhaps are maybe not as advertised to the greater community of things that have been accomplished in the last few years and even in the last few months. So I want to share some of those pieces with you. Just to kind of start off with some big rocks. So as I think about the work that we've done, and Craig and I've been here since July officially, maybe a little earlier, but July officially. Three things that we've really tried to focus on are three phrases. One, calm is contagious, which our teachers and our staff, our kids know. That was something we pretty quickly when we arrived here, we knew that we needed to do some work on helping kind of calm things down. And so calm is contagious, so is greatness was that phrase. The second one is do the right thing, treat people right. And the third is get to the other side. And to get to the other side came when the pandemic occurred or started. And so I want to talk about those just a little bit. Calm and contagious. Mr. Buckler and I quickly determined upon arrival that we had inherited our aggravated bees when we got here. Not necessarily due to anything more than the leadership style of the previous administration and reactions to some of those decisions. The 16 months that we've been here, 9 of those have been under an international pandemic, rules that on some days change by the hour. Keeping kids healthy and engaged in as much normalcy as we can is our current focus. While I feel our eyes have all settled down with consistent approaches and practices to problems and issues, the pandemic continues to have people on edge, just like in society. In general, none of us like extra rules that make us feel confined. We all have a mask on today. Nobody's excited about that. I can't wait till we can have the mask burning party. I'm sure probably many of you will join me in that. Who would have ever thought that we made the theme of our first school year in Martinsville, calm is contagious, how important those first 8 months would be in helping people relax a bit for the next stage, which was COVID. Timing of that message was everything in my opinion. Doing the right thing and treating people right. Most employees were unsettled when we arrived, many of which were worried about their standing. Our focus is and will continue to be on growing our existing staff and providing them with the tools they need to provide the best outcomes for our students. This requires a commitment to training and professional development for every employee, no matter their responsibilities. With all positions of leadership and management, tough decisions must be made when behavior exceeds the basic expectations of Indiana Code, school board policy, and general ethical guidelines. I'm pleased to report that in our time with Martinsville, we have some very amazing staff we're excited to work with. We're proud of every single day. We set high expectations because we know people rise to what's expected, and it makes us much more focused on our students and their respective outcomes. And finally, getting to the other side, which we're all super excited about and focused to get to. There is hope. We have to get to the other side of the pandemic. Doing as much along the way to resume normal activities is helpful not only to our students, but to our overall community. While we anticipate some difficult months ahead, we also recognize that there will be an end to this madness and look forward to opportunities to celebrate each student's grit and determination to get there alongside us. So once we're over the hump and we get to the other side, we're definitely going to celebrate the hard work everyone's put in to get us to a safe point and over the pandemic hump. We're also going to look at things in a weed the garden. So we're having conversations currently with our principals and our leadership about what are the things that we put on hold as a result of the pandemic. We don't necessarily want to start back up when the pandemic is over. It's a really good time to weed the garden and make sure that we're doing the best things that we can for kids because they're the best things for kids, not just because it's something that we've always done. So this is a great opportunity for that. So back to the big rocks. We're going to keep focused on attracting our students back who took the COVID year. Our proportion of students out this year is in alignment with national COVID trends. We continue to be focused on tracking those students and keeping in personal touch so that at the end of the school year, hopefully those same students are back with us. That's a major goal for us. Enrollment process through our demographic study completed in the spring of 2020 and updated again this fall. Determine next steps based upon this information. Determine what important district decisions need to be made. If enrollment continues to decline work levels as the demographic study indicates, what we need to do moving forward. We also need to focus on supporting our students during the unrest in our country as it relates to Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ discrimination, peaceful social justice rallies, and violence as it relates to rioting. Our students were home with a front row seat to this over the last many months and are very active in their voices to us about these events. We are a public school system. We serve every student who walks through the door. Our staff are asking for support in these areas, so we will continue to expand our understanding of the best practices of diversity. We're also working on ways in which to give our students a public voice, whether that be in board meetings or in separate focused student-led meetings. I want to thank Michelle Law for pressuring me on that to get that moving, so thank you. Keeping a continued focus on furthering our partnership with the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching. We received a significant grant, thank you, Mr. Butler, and his work with his team. We're going to use these grant dollars to ensure our curriculum promotes an opportunity for every student to receive a comprehensive, equitable, rigorous, and standards-based education across all grade levels and all subject areas. Along those same lines, continue to strategically look at buildings and programs and make decisions on what projects are most important for our school community. While our buildings are in amazing shape, we need to explore whether they offer the exact spaces we need for today's academic and student needs. All of these things under a balanced budget. We must continue to do all these things in the district in the most fiscally responsible way as possible, all the while introducing and maintaining high-quality programs for our students. So this is where you all come in. Whether you're on the board currently or you're elected in the future, being a school board member is a huge job, huge. And you're applying for it. So being a school board member can be one of the most rewarding opportunities, but it also comes with a great deal of pressure. Today's opportunity with Dr. Adamson is one that we hope will shed some light on the responsibilities of the position and offer insight to those who may have never served on the school board. Ultimately, I personally appreciate everyone coming tonight as an indication that you care about our students, despite all the other noise, and are here to join me in continuing to move us forward. Finally, we appreciate, as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Adamson joining us tonight, and I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to share with us. So Dr. Adamson, a long-winded couple paragraphs, and turn things over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arthur. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you this evening. I don't get the opportunity to converse with many people who are anticipating possibly becoming a board member. I've done that in years past, certainly, as I shared with you. I did what you folks are doing 5 times. One of those times, it was not contested. And I was beaten running for a 6th term. They only thought they hurt my feelings. Because after 20 years, it was really okay to step away from it, although I enjoyed it. It's being a school board member, I can honestly tell you, was the most enjoyable activity I have ever been associated with in my adult life. And I was on the board for 20 years, and I can honestly tell you that they were 15 of the happiest years of my life. As Dr. Arthur has shared with you, there's a lot of pressure in being a school board member, and wow, you guys really know how to pick the time to throw your name into the ring, right? Because these are unprecedented times for public education. No one has been a board member in previous years with a set of circumstances like you are planning on jumping into. No one has been a board member during a pandemic except those who are currently serving as board members right now. And for those of you who will be elected or hope to be elected, should be elected, you're going to be jumping right into that fray. And I will tell you that the pandemic playbook is still being written and will be being written long after we come through this on the other side. And I believe it will, but no one knows when, no one knows how long it will be. And hindsight is always 20/20 in circumstances like this. We will always be able to look back and say, would have, should have, could have. But during the time, the best you can ever hope to do is make decisions based on the best information that is currently available to you. Because that's the best there is. No one has gone through this before. And being a board member can be difficult on a good day. But you add the complexities of dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic on top of that, and it can be a very stressful situation. It's changed the way we view public education. It changed the way we will continue to provide public education in the decades to come. Because if we stop and look at the importance of virtual education in today's environment and what that's meant to us, wow, did it really show us some big holes that we have in public education, not necessarily here at Martinsville or Avon where I'm from, or Danville or IPS, but in general throughout the state of Indiana and across the country. It's changed the way that we need to be prepared to deliver public education in what we recognize as a less than ideal circumstance, right? But we can't not provide education. So the challenges will be there, and you should know that up front. That's not my presentation, so now we'll get on with the good stuff. So we'll talk a little bit. I'll try not to bore you. I will tell you this, those of you who are elected, it will take you the better part of 2 years to become comfortable in your role and responsibility. I think seated board members would validate that statement in your conversations with them. And it's not the fact that anything or any one part of being a board member is that difficult. It's just the sheer volume of information and topics that are apt to come across your desk at any one point in time. It'll take a couple of years just to go through that cycle of almost everything that you're liable to see as board members in the boardroom. So be prepared to be patient. And if there's one thing that I can tell you that is absolutely imperative is be patient. A number of you have shared that you come from a public education background. That's great. That means one of two things. You'll either be very, very good as a board member, or you'll be very, very bad as a board member. And I shared that same statement with boards all over the state of Indiana, because it doesn't seem to be a middle ground. When you're very, very good coming from that background, it's because you'll be able to share the experiences from your teaching experiences or administrator experiences, and you'll be able to help round out the board's collective understanding about education from that perspective. When it's really, really bad is when you're still believing you're in the classroom, and you're not. Sitting on the other side of the board table is dramatically different than being in public education as a classroom instructor. And I've had a number of administrators and teachers who have gone on to become board members who have come back in a couple of years and said, wow, Dr. Adamson, you really hit the nail on the head right there. This was nothing like what we thought it would be. But don't despair. Your background in education will serve you well when you use that background and experience to help your fellow board members wrap their minds around experiences that perhaps they don't have knowledge of. Board members come from all professions. The vast majority of them do not come out of a public education background. Doctors, nurses, construction workers, plumbers, pipe fitters, you name it. All occupations are represented in board service across the state of Indiana and throughout the country. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with the presentation I had. I've allowed some time at the end for some questions, so I'll move through the presentation. If you've got questions, though, jot them down. We'll have a Q&A, very, very brief Q&A probably after the presentation. And I'll be happy to answer any questions I can for you. Real quickly, ISBA is a nonprofit organization. We exist solely to represent school boards and school board members. I work for school board members. We like superintendents, but I work for school board members, right? So I would tell you that there are 290 school corporations. The Metropolitan School District of Martinsville is one of those. Okay, they're all school corporations in Indiana. 290 of those, about 1,687 school board members, 280 of those school corporations boards are elected. The other 10 are appointed, or a variety of appointed and elected. So Vast majority of board members are elected. So that's just a little demographic about ISBA and what we do. We're a very lean staff. There's only 7 of us. Executive Director Terry Spradlin, General Counsel Lisa Tansel, Senior Counsel Julie Slavens. I'm the Director of Board Services. Brooke Order is our conference coordinator. Rayanne Motzinger is our comptroller. And we are just filling a position that had been opened and vacated for the administrative assistant position. So we do a lot with a few of us in Indiana, as I think you will find out. So we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation right now. And we're going to talk about these kinds of things briefly. This is not everything that you need to know as a board member, but this is kind of a good introduction, I think, perhaps get your mind thinking in terms of what it means to be a board member. So we're going to talk a little bit about how boards and superintendents operate working together. We're going to talk a little bit about transparency and governance. That's a huge topic in this environment today. People are always wanting boards to be transparent, and we're going to have a little discussion about what that really means. And we'll also speak briefly about home rule, exercising board power individually and collectively. Then we're going to talk a little bit about ethics and governance, because I think that's a key point that every board member needs to hone in on as they begin to contemplate the service in the boardroom. And an ethics framework and conflicts of interest, we'll cover those briefly. I'm going to briefly cover confidentiality, not because it's not a big topic, but we don't have enough time to delve into that very deeply today. But we'll talk some about confidentiality and then take time for questions and answers. So let's talk a little bit about how boards and superintendents operate. Well, boards and superintendents work together. Now, that's a surprise to many communities because they believe that you folks ought to be fighting each other all the time. The truth is, boards and superintendents are on the same side of the governance table. You are not enemies. You may have a disagreement. You may disagree about a course of action or a recommendation, but you want the same things. So, but superintendents are not board members. They don't get a vote. They make recommendations. They don't vote. But board members aren't superintendents either. And so they are very, very distinct positions in the school system, but they work very, very closely together to provide the leadership that's necessary for the school corporation to provide public education opportunities for the kids in your district. It really is a question of leadership versus management. And I love to tell board members, you either have the best job or the worst job in public education, and it really depends on your perspective. The perspective you attain after years of service, or the perspective you have going into the job, because you will quickly find that you're accountable for everything, but you manage nothing. You manage nothing. It really is a difference between thinking about your position from a leadership perspective and then who is operating from a management perspective. So boards and superintendents in their collective work together are providing leadership. They are providing the vision for the corporation, the direction to pursue, and those kinds of things, right? They're thinking about tomorrow and what's going to happen tomorrow. There are a whole staff present in your school corporations whose jobs it is to take care of today. That is their job. Board members, you can't take care of today because if you're trying to fix something that's today issues, you're too late already. It's here. You can't change it. You can't make it different. But you can change tomorrow and next week and next year and so on and so forth. So working together with the superintendent, you're providing leadership and direction for the corporation. Superintendents, again, and the administrative team are providing management. They are supervising the daily activities that occur in your school corporation throughout the school year and even over the summer months to make sure that the facilities are ready, that policies are being followed, and that school can occur. I like to tell boards that they operate from a governance oversight position. A governance oversight position is not it's not a difficult concept, but it's one that if you're not used to hearing it, may seem a little out there, just a little bit. But let me just, Michelle, how long are you meet once or twice a month?
Once.
Once a month. How long are your meetings?
Typically an hour.
An hour, once a month. 1 hour, once a month. 12 hours a year spent in a regular board meeting conducting the business of the corporation. Now, I understand you'll have homework, you'll be getting prepared for your meetings, you'll be reading board packets, you'll be involved in other ways besides that, but in the actual on-site business for the corporation, 12 hours a year. And throw in a few special meetings here and there that are necessary in almost every corporation. Clearly, you are not immersed in public education as school board members, but you will brush against it at regular intervals throughout the year. And that is important. So you're not involved to day-to-day activities. That's why you hire other people. That's why you have a superintendent, an administrative team, and staffs in all of your buildings. Their job is to take care of the day-to-day activities. But you will be checking in at regular intervals to conduct the official business. And as you're conducting that business, you will be looking for validation that policies are being followed. Policy belongs to the school board. It's not the superintendent's policy. It's not your attorney's policy. It is the school board's policy. Consequently, if something is superintendents, never your superintendents, never your attorneys. If it's broken, it's your fault because you are responsible for school policy. And that policy manual is your permission for everybody to do what they do on a daily basis in that corporation. Why? Because you're not there. You shouldn't be there. You're doing the things that you do. You're teaching, or you're working at your other jobs, or you're doing whatever you've done up to that point. You're not here on a daily basis, nor should you be interfering in the day-to-day activities. That's not your job as a board member. That's the people you've hired to do that job. You're also going to be checking and looking for validation, and you'll get this information through the administrative team, through your superintendent, typically. You're going to want to know that strategic initiatives are being met. Your superintendent very briefly outlined many things that are happening in your school corporation, pandemic related and post-pandemic focused. And so, you're going to be looking for continuing information in that regard. Plus looking to see and how student achievement initiatives are being followed in your corporation. Your superintendent provides you that information. And if it's other information you wish to find out, you send those requests as a board to the superintendent, and that information is provided to you. And then another very important activity that the board has and is specifically responsible for is the school corporation's financial performance. You're going to make sure that you have sound fiscal policy and that your budget's being developed and being managed by your administrators so that your corporation continues to operate from a position of financial solvency, right? So you can't do what you don't have money to do. And so sometimes we're not able to do many of the things we really wish we could do because we just don't have the money to do that. Now, school corporations all over Indiana are looking at alternative methods for getting additional funding. The dreaded referendum word gets vocalized with more frequency every election cycle as more and more schools. So it's not really a question of whether or not you will ever want to do a referendum. It's only a matter of when you do the referendum that you subsequently need to help provide additional educational opportunities in your school corporation. Maybe a long time from now, but it'll be sometime. I would almost bet my career on that. That's why I've seen a lot of folks who say, we'll never do it. And next thing you know, they're asking their community to support a referendum effort from either an educational fund perspective or an operational fund perspective. So those three things are the things that most boards will be looking at from that perspective. So continuing, boards and superintendents have specific jobs they do. Some boards and superintendents acquire real estate and they construct buildings. Now, there's not a whole lot of building construction going on in the state of Indiana, but there is some, lots of remodeling efforts, not as much building going on. It's a lot harder to get that kind of bond issues for new construction, but there is some of that. And many times we see boards tearing down what appears to their community folks to be perfectly good buildings. But the problem with that is those perfectly good buildings on the outside don't provide the technological infrastructure that's necessary for the educational environment we expect our kids to have today, right? So we see them being purposed for other things, or we see new construction taking place for that. But that happens, and so you'll be looking at things like that. You'll be buying buses. Maybe not very frequently, but periodically you're going to buy a bus or two. And you're going to buy furniture as necessary. You're going to provide supplies on an annual basis. All of those things are getting worked out in the budget. You're going to see things come across your claims list for all of those supplies. You're going to hire and fire necessary personnel. I want to put a caveat on that. The only person you hire and fire is the superintendent of schools. Board members don't hire and fire principals, coaches, or teachers, or staff members. Not your job. You hire and fire a superintendent, right? Board members have one employee that works for them. That is the superintendent of schools. Everyone else in the corporation, either directly or indirectly, works for the superintendent, right? Okay, so that's really important for you to understand, because number one, you have no legal authority to hire and fire anybody except the superintendent, right? Now, they probably shouldn't fire you right away, right? I would hope not. But that is an important thing for you to know. But you sign the contracts for everyone because you are the authorizing agent. You have to sign the contract so they can get a paycheck, right? And so you do sign all those contracts. You will provide transportation, like bus routes that go around your community picking up your kids. Actually, wow, let's stop and think about what boards do. They provide the largest transportation system in your county. They provide the largest food service distribution in your district. They are probably the largest employer in your district. Public education, folks, is big business. It is big business. That's why the Board of Trustees is not dissimilar to the Board of Trustees at a very large corporation, a General Motors. You're not as large as GM, but the structure is very different. What's your budget for advertising?
For advertising?
Yeah, no, just what do you advertise?
Oh, 26 million. 26 associations, 16 to property.
Okay, so 42.
27 for education, 16 to property.
Okay, so 40 plus million. So you will be the trustees of a multi-million-dollar corporation here in Martinsville, Indiana. $40+ million. You're going to hold one person accountable for the operation of that multi-million-dollar facility, and that's your superintendent of schools. Now, That's really beneficial, because if anything's broken in your school system, whose fault is it? It's his fault. He knows that. Every superintendent understands that the buck stops with them. They have the responsibility. It is their job to manage this multi-million-dollar corporation on your behalf as the trustees of that same multi-million-dollar corporation. And they still will be superintendents, go figure, right? But that's the truth. So that line of command, that line of authority is absolutely critical. You provide lunch and breakfast programs and so on. You will also, as we continue, you will also provide curricular materials. You'll buy textbooks, you'll buy supplies the kids need. You're going to levy taxes, make budgets. You're going to purchase insurance for everybody. You're going to defend employees who've been sued. Part of your job will be to do that for some of them. Continuing, we say that boards and superintendents have some important laws that you will become more familiar with the longer you serve. Student discipline laws, hiring and firing laws, purchasing laws, because you can't just go out and buy something that you want to because you want to. There are rules that you have to follow when you make purchases in school corporations. There'll be building project laws. You can't just build a school or a bus barn or a school facility or a playground any place you want to, right? You got to follow the laws. And then we spoke about referenda and the particular laws that govern referendums in the state of Indiana. Let's talk just a little bit about transparency in governance. And this is one of those issues that I think people really wrestle with, whether you're a veteran board member or whether you are an aspiring board member. Understanding what transparency truly means can be difficult. But really, when I think of transparency in governance, and especially in governance oversight, it's when a board has a consistent, defendable process of decision making. It's not secret stuff. It's a process of deliberation that is defendable in public for the decisions you reach. You will only make decisions in public meetings. You may have discussions with fellow board members, administrators, in between meetings, but official decisions of the governing body can only be made in a publicly advertised and convened meeting of the board. Most decisions you reach in the boardroom need only be passed by a majority of a quorum. So for you, in your case, that's 3 board members, of a 5-member board. So 3 board members constitute a quorum. But there are certain decisions that boards make that require a majority vote of the entire board. That would still be 3 board members voting yay or nay on the situation. But those decisions can only be made in a public session. You've been given some leeway during this pandemic to exercise virtual attendance. Most boards are meeting kind of like this today, but a few of them are still meeting remotely and taking advantage of that. Prior to the pandemic, you had to be present to vote. You could still call in, you could still Zoom in. However, you did not have a vote. You could discuss and hear the discussion, but you didn't have a vote. And the Public Access Counselor has made an exception to those rules because of the health emergency. The other thing for transparency in governance is that board members do not have hidden agendas or ulterior motives. That helps no one. Now, I'm not talking about things you're passionate about, because you hopefully be very vocal about those things. But once in a while, we get board members who run for board member because they want to fire or have somebody fired, or they want to make a circumstance tough for individuals who are already in the system in one way or another. That never works out very well. And so it's important that, you know, board members be open and honest up front. You can't do anything by yourself anyway, you know, and we'll talk a little more about that in a moment. No surprising fellow board members or the administration, or vice versa. The administration doesn't surprise you either. So when you are making decisions in the boardroom, when and if you become board members, these are the kinds of things that I hope you will look for and that will be provided to you to help you in your decision-making process. Number one is all the background information you need on the matter before you. Number two, you need to have sufficient time to review it. The night of the board meeting is not sufficient, right? So have enough time to review that information. Or if you have questions, to call and get the answers to those questions. And we don't have enough time to talk about that process, but yes, you can ask questions before the board meeting night on your agenda packet. And then number three, if you are expected to render a decision to vote on a particular item, you should want an administrative recommendation. Didn't say you had to follow that recommendation, but you should want it nonetheless, because that's what you hired this person for, to manage your multi-million-dollar corporation. You should want to know what the administration's position is, rather than coming into the boardroom and shooting from the hip on a recommendation that they have not weighed in on. They may not care. They may say you can do whatever you want to, but you should want that definition from the administration. I've rarely ever found superintendents without recommendations to provide their trustees. Again, you're on the same side. You're on the same team. So you should want that information. Honesty and openness. See, when we're really talking about transparency and governance, that's what we're mostly talking about. The public is saying, be honest with us. Don't hide stuff from us. Make your decisions in open without ulterior motives, or hidden agendas, and be honest with us and open about the reasons for that. They may not like it. You may make decisions that has everybody hopping mad at you, but you will know it's the right decision to make before you make it. And that's when the true mettle of a board member is tested. When you have to make a decision you'd rather not make. For those of you who have been teachers, you had to make those decisions from time to time. Well, it's just like that, only 10 times harder, because you got more than just that one set of parents coming at you. You got people that you thought were your friends who are angry with you because you're about ready to make a decision that they believe you are, that they don't like. But you will have the information in front of there. They won't come to all your board meetings. They won't get all the information. You know what everyone else in your community is doing tonight? All the things you used to do before you thought of being a board member. They don't care that you're here. They are, and I don't mean that they don't care because they don't care about you. This is not what they do. They're happy that you've thrown your name into the ring. They're happy that those of you who are serving are serving in that capacity. They're doing the things that parents do with kids on a school night. And, you know, they're watching TV, they're eating supper, they're doing all the things that families do. They're not doing this. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Because they love the kids, they love this school, and they're just happy that you throw your name into the ring. So we give the community a pass because sometimes they don't understand all the background on decisions that come before the governing body, and those things can be tough. Home rule authority is one of those things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Let's just say home rule authority exists from the Indiana General Assembly for school boards, and it allows you to exercise additional powers as long as those aren't prohibited by another statute, by law in some other area. And the power hasn't been granted to another agency, so, or political subdivision. So you can't overrule the town council and so on and so forth, see what I mean? So, but you do have, an example of this might be paying the moving expenses of a superintendent. There's an example for that. It gives you some license to do certain things as long as it's not prohibited by statute. Let's talk just a moment about exercising board power. This is going to be very, very quick because this is either something that everybody kind of already knows or is kind of a shocker to them. Board authority. Everybody talks about the authority of the board. Keep in mind, it's the authority of the board, not the authority of the board member. Two different things, right? So you have the board authority to exercise when you are sitting as a member of the board in a lawfully advertised and convened meeting. That's when the board has authority. Okay? The board, all 5 of you here that will be seated as board members, have board authority. Your individual authority sitting in that meeting is to exercise your vote, to contribute to the decision-making process regarding agenda items and decisions before you as a governing body. Okay? Individual authority, you have no greater authority than any other patron of the school corporation outside of a lawfully advertised and convened meeting. So, when the gavel drops and the meeting is convened, you're a board member. When the gavel drops and the meeting is dismissed, you're just like every other citizen in your community from an authority position. Now, no one will ever allow you to take off that board hat. I'm just letting you know that right now. Everyone will still see you as a board member and identify with you as a board member, but you have 0 authority outside of the boardroom. Okay? So that's really an important concept to consider and to reflect upon as you embark on this journey that you're anticipating. Because if you try to exercise board authority by yourself, you're going to run into issues. And it won't be a pleasant experience. So it's better to incorporate that and to think about that very, very considerately before you take office. So individually, no authority. Collectively, all the authority that the General Assembly grants you as a political subdivision in the state of Indiana. You operate at the behest of the Indiana General Assembly. Now, you represent kids, you represent your community and all that stuff, and I get it, but you answer to the Indiana General Assembly. And if you don't believe that, talk to the folks at Muncie and Gary. Okay. So I would just tell you that we are very, very conscious of the state legislature and the power that they have over what we do in local school corporations. So let's talk a little bit about ethics and governance. And I want to talk a little bit about an ethics framework here. This may be repetitious for some of you, you may already know this, but I want to cover this very, very briefly because there's like 3 different schools of ethic thought as we think about it. We talk about ethics, you know, everybody has a general understanding. We typically think of ethics as, oh, well, what guides our own principles of right and wrong. And that's not a bad definition, but that's really pertaining a lot to what we call virtue ethics. And virtue ethics are your individual moral character. So all of you come into the boardroom and sit down at the table with your own standard of virtue ethics. It's your moral compass is another word that we use for that. So, and those are represented by your own understanding and importance of honesty, personal integrity, and how fairly you interact with everyone. That's one of those standards. There's also what we call consequentialist ethics. And that theory of ethics views it as when you act, whatever the results of those actions justifies whether it was right or wrong. This is that old adage, well, the end justifies the means, right? Now, that may be at war with your own virtue ethics, but it may have a place in your consideration and decision-making when you're dealing with ethical consideration. Maybe. But you can't deny it because people will tell you that that's the kinds of decisions you ought to make. Well, it doesn't matter if it felt bad making that decision. We got what we wanted, right? That's that kind of decision-making philosophy. And then deontological ethics, that's really duty-based ethics. And that's grounded on an established set of the rules. If you break this rule, there's a consequence. We're comfortable with that last one. If you break the rules, there are consequences. But what if you break the rules and you can delay the penalty for a week or two until the championship game is played? And I've seen communities turned upside down when decisions have come to the governing body to a hold, and it was one of those heartbreaking decisions that you have to make from a duty-based point of reference. So I only share these with you because individual ethics are part of your everyday decision-making. And each of you will wrestle with these decisions periodically in a board career. And whether or not you call on this or not, you'll refer to those three kinds of ethic theories in your decision making. But here's the deal. The board collectively has its ethic as well. And its ethic is the collective expression of all of you and the decisions you reach as a governing body. As a governing body. I often have people say, well, it only takes 3 people, in your case, to make a decision for the board. That's wrong. It takes all of you. Because everybody gets a vote to spend. And every decision that you make that will ever come before you, you will have 1 vote to spend. When a motion's made and second, and it comes to a vote, you can vote yes, and you can vote, or you can vote no. And ultimately, it's mathematics. It's the sum of the pluses and minuses that determine the direction the board takes. And it's a decision of the board, not of the majority of the board. It's of the board. And so when you look at these kinds of ethical theories and you anticipate some of the things that could come across your desk, what kind of an ethics character do you want your board to have? So that's important. So when we think ethics and governance, obviously we think children first, right? If you're not thinking kids first, this is not your job. You got to be thinking kids first. You may not always be able to act in a manner that initially seems that it's kids first, but that should be the driving force that has encouraged you to throw your name into the ring. You will be representing the entire school community, not just people who live in your neighborhood, people who live in your district, or the people who scream the loudest at the board meeting. You will be there to represent the interests of all the constituents in your school corporation, including probably the 60 or 70% of those folks who do not have kids in school. You're representing their best interests in public education as well. They've elected you to do that, to represent their interests. And sometimes that's even when they're not sure what their best interests are. But they're going to be relying on you to make those decisions on their behalf. So you represent the entire school community. You will want to respect the relationship that you have with your fellow board members. You know, there's no requirement for you to like each other. You don't have to, it's a lot easier if you do. But there's no requirement to like each other. But I would hope that you develop a healthy, professional respect for each other in the boardroom, because you ought to be there for the same reasons. You may have different things you're passionate about, but if you're thinking children first, if you're thinking we're going to provide the best educational opportunities for kids, then you can have the discussion. You can have a robust discussion, a passionate discussion over those things. And so the other thing that you'll need to do is periodically, and I'll speak a little more to this in a little bit, maintain confidentiality. If your word is not trustworthy, if you can't be trusted to keep sensitive information confidential when it is shared with you, then you need to withdraw. You don't need to be a board member, because it is absolutely critical periodically that confidential information is shared with board members, and there's only one remedy when you can't maintain confidence, and that is don't share things that are confidential with you. That hurts the administrative team. That hurts them, because periodically they need to share with you so you understand what's happening, sensitive information, but not if it's going to be in tomorrow's paper the night after it's shared with you. You need to respect your relationship with the superintendent. Your superintendent works for the board, not for an individual board member. Okay? Works for the board. Superintendent will probably answer any question when you call. But you need to be sensitive to that too. Because if you're calling them 3 times a day and every other board member is calling them 3 times a day, they don't have time to get their job done. So you need to be cognizant of that, as well as other administrators. Now, depending on local practices, I tell board members all the time, you call superintendent. That's your go-to person. If he wants to direct you to another administrator, or you've got a practice that supports that, fine, that's okay. But minimally, you start off with that expectation that that's your go-to person. You don't call building level administrators, you don't call classroom teachers, you don't call head custodians, you don't call those, they don't work for you, they work for him. Authority. If you do not have chain of command and line of authority, you have chaos. And you can't permit it. And for those of you who are teachers, I mean, just like the parent running to the superintendent when they were upset with something that happened in the classroom, rather than coming and talking to you. And equate it this way. When we talk about line of authority, if you have a problem with your car, you don't make a trip to Detroit to go see the trustees of General Motors at Ford Motor Company. No, you go to the dealership. Person closest to the point of issue. That's what you do. Same thing with you. The people who handle problems for your community work at school. Community folks will abuse you from time to time because they want you to fix their problems. Good people, they just don't want to deal with it, don't know how to deal with it. Teaching moment for you, and that's when you instruct them on proper use of line of authority, visiting, running things up chain of command to find solutions. You will want to allow your superintendent to exercise his full administrative authority. He doesn't need your help on a day-to-day basis. If he needs you to help him, assist him, he'll call you, or he'll share with you. There's decisions that are extremely sensitive, but allow him to do his job. Make sure that when you are making decisions on behalf of the corporation, that you've allowed your superintendent to weigh in on those, on your consideration, to give you that recommendation for you to consider in your thought process before you make a decision. Moving on, let's talk just a little bit about conflicts of interest. This is something that everybody wrestles with. When you become a board member, typically at the reorganization meeting in January, they'll pass out this form that is for you to sign a conflict of interest statement. That's so that if you have any legitimate conflicts of interest, you have disclosed them, all right? Conflicts of interest do not prohibit board members from voting. Lots of people say, well, I got a conflict of interest, I can't vote. Sure you can, but you better have disclosed it so that everybody and their uncle knows that it was a conflict of interest. Now, look at ethical perspective. I would say, is it really in your best interest to weigh in on that kind of decision that people are going to question your objectivity? Probably not. So I typically encourage board members to back away from those kinds of statements where the community might raise their eyebrows because you're weighing in on a subject that they view is too close to home, right? So that's important. So, but legal conflicts of interest are really those decisions you would make where you would have or receive some kind of personal benefit from the actions or decisions made in your official capacity as a board member. Okay, so ethical conflicts of interest could be just a whole bunch of stuff. Somebody said that they have a spouse that works at school. People are going to do that as an ethical conflict of interest. It's no longer a legal conflict of interest, but it certainly is an ethical conflict of interest. Now, if you are approving teaching contracts, as you do right after negotiations, the master contract, you're approving that contract. Well, everybody's getting the same contract. That's not a conflict. But if you're approving a contract for a spouse or a family member, close family member that works at school, that is peculiar to them, teaching or a sponsorship or a coaching position addendum to the contract, and people are going to say, oh, yeah, they just did that so they could get their friend or family in there. So you can catch a lot of heat for that. I encourage board members to step back from those too. You don't have to, but it could be a lot easier. And you should have enough confidence in your fellow board members to make the best decision on behalf of the corporation regarding that. So those two kinds of conflicts of interest, they're there. We deal with them the same way, legal and ethical. Our recommendation is always pull back away from them if you think that people are going to question your objectivity. Okay? Don't have to, but we encourage you to. It makes your life a lot better. Confidentiality, and we talked about that just a little bit. You are allowed to maintain confidence. Now you say, wow, Michael, you just spent a lot of time talking to us about transparency. Well, transparency except for these kinds of things. And there are a few things when you are allowed, and this certainly isn't all of them, but you may be having strategy discussions with regard to talking about a referendum, with regard to negotiations. You may be dealing with school safety measures that you're anticipating or that you're receiving information about. You can have an executive session and talk about those kinds of things. You may be interviewing prospective employees. That typically will not involve the board unless you're hiring a superintendent. But in some cases it may, depending on local practice. You might have some discussion of confidential records. That is typically going to be employee confidential records. And when you're talking about their status as an employee, sometimes those come to bear. And you can have that kind of a discussion in executive session. Remember what I said a while ago? If you can't be trusted to not disclose that kind of information, you don't need to be a board member. You just don't. Okay? You've got to be trustworthy. And you need to be able to look to the right and the left of you in the boardroom, knowing that sensitive information is not going to find its way into the public after an executive session. You might have some discussion of employee evaluation. Superintendent's a prime example. You conduct superintendent's evaluation once a year in an executive session. It's not a public meeting kind of meeting. And then, should you need individual board training with me or another consultant, board members are allowed to have their own professional development on roles and responsibilities as board members in an executive session. So that does not have to be a public session. And there are some others. But I've gone through a lot of this stuff kind of thoroughly, and it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose, right? The one thing that I would tell you is this. If you're fortunate enough to become a board member, never discount the value of your own professional development as you serve. You will not learn it all in one meeting. You won't learn it all in the first year. You won't learn it all in the second. But you will build up an arsenal of information that's important for you to utilize in your decision-making processes as you go forward. And public education is not static, it's dynamic. And so attending seminars and meetings that permit you to refresh your understanding of educational initiatives throughout the state or throughout the country are of value to you, so do not discount that. ISBA offers you a tremendous amount of information. As a matter of fact, we're having a new board member academy that will begin the first part of February. 4 live virtual seminars, and then 8 recorded webinars will be available in that series. And it will begin in February, it'll conclude the first part of June. But it kind of talks about a few of these things in more detail and a lot of other things that will be important for you to know. If you stop and consider that you're going to spend the first couple of years just getting comfortable, for one of you here, that's a certainty, right? There's going to be one brand new board member, minimum. And so I would tell you that for one person here, you're going to spend the first 2 years just getting comfortable. The best thing you can do during that period of time is make sure you take advantage of all the educational opportunities that you can participate in to help you lessen that learning curve on behalf of your board. The quicker you get up to speed, the quicker the board does its best work. So it's been a pleasure being here with you. I'm happy to take any questions if we have a minute or two for that. Killed you all, huh?
Anybody have a question they'd like to ask Dr. Adamson? I have one.
Appreciate you taking the time with us this evening and explaining some things. So thank you. I don't really have a question. Just want to say thank you for spending time with us this evening and allowing us to be here.
Happy to do so.
I'd like to know where that long hair came.
You know what? This is my COVID duty. I haven't cut my hair since March, and that's when we went home.
Dr. Adams, I have one question that it seems to be in different communities I've worked in, and it has popped up here as well. When we have to make tough decisions about student discipline, and we haven't really had that issue necessarily here, but I've had it in other places, as well as HR decisions. So we have had to make some tough HR decisions in the last few months, and so the last 6 to 8 months. And so there is always that view from the outside that people are not being transparent and not sharing. And I feel like you hit this, but if you wouldn't mind speaking to that just a little bit about the responsibilities of the board, responsibilities of us as employees who are overseeing those individuals in terms of protecting those individuals no matter what it is they've done.
Yeah, some of the worst things that you deal with as a board, and it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough that, I can count the times on one hand it happened to me in 20 years, but I remember every one of those times, When you're dealing with student discipline issues, student expulsions, things of that nature, different school corporations have different practices. Sometimes those end with the superintendent, their last right of appeal in the system before seeking an outside remedy. Other places, the last right of appeal is with the Board of Trustees. Those are the hardest meetings you'll ever sit into, and you're not going to get all the information about certain kinds of issues prior to those kinds of meetings, because you have to be able to sit and objectively look at that. Now, it's almost a given that if a meeting gets that far, it's a foregone conclusion of the direction it needs to take, because you've got policy that dictates how everyone responds at each step of the way. So by the time it gets to your table, it's very easily spelled out the steps that have been taken. And besides that, if policy hadn't been followed, it would have never gotten that far to begin with. So, but sitting across the table from a father that's disgusted, the kid who's twiddling his thumbs and doesn't care, and the mother who's crying because they know that child needs to be in school. And so do you. And so do you. But when we look at duty-based ethics and rules have been broken to the degree that an alternative solution has to be sought, you're left with little recourse other than divide. Even though in your heart of hearts, that kid needs to be in school too. There just needs to be a solution somewhere, right? Sometimes there can't be. And sometimes you have to make a tough decision with regard to that. There will also, from time to time, and unfortunately, be situations that happen that deal with kids or faculty members or employees that are extremely uncomfortable. And especially when those situations involve children. That happens in the best of schools, not just the schools that are having the roughest times, but it happens in the best of schools. You're going to hear rumors, and you need to keep yourself as far away from the rumor mill as possible as board members. And by any stretch of the imagination, if you're the person who gets told about a situation like that, you don't pick up the phone and call another board member. You come and pick up the phone or come directly and see the superintendent of schools. And you share that information with him, and you leave it at his doorstep, and you go home, and you do not discuss it with anyone. Now that's hard, because we want to know, right? What's the result? What's happening? Who's involved? You need to be confident that your administration has taken that to the proper authorities. Now, a week later, you hear the same thing again. You're thinking, what the heck? I can't believe they haven't done anything. Probably did. In all likelihood, have. But when you involve outside agencies, it doesn't happen in 24 hours. And it takes time to build those cases. And you have to be patient with the system we have to live with. Don't fuel the rumor mill. If people try to discuss it with you, say, hey, sorry, I can't discuss that. Be friendly, but that's okay. Can't discuss that, thank you. And if the superintendent needs to involve you down the road regarding some kind of action, disciplinary or otherwise, that needs your involvement, he'll share that with you, or at a comfortable time when he can disclose information. But sometimes there's information you can't have. And that's because the board sits as the last right of appeal in certainly with staff situations, recommendations of discharge or non-renewal. So you need to be comfortable with that. And all of those things can be shared with you in greater depth when you become a board member, and they will be. But I wish everyone luck. I meant it when I said it was a great experience. I do look back on it as one of the highlights of my life. I'd do it all over again. Some of the roughest times was inter-board conflict. Work diligently to make sure that does not become part of your legacy. Because you'll waste an inordinate amount of time fussing and cheating when you ought to be talking about the things that are important for kids. And so that's the one thing that I'd like to share as well. So, did I even cover that?
You did, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here tonight. It's a pleasure having you, and I think we probably all taken some extra things from tonight that maybe we didn't remember or didn't know, or what have you included. So thank you for being here, and we appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be seeing you soon again. And I would also put a plug in for ISBA just in the fact that you are very helpful superintendents as well, but I know that your focus is on supporting school boards, et cetera. And we can always count on you all. And just for those who are potentially running as candidates, we are members of ISBA, as Dr. Adamson mentioned, talking about different school systems that are part of ISBA. And so we participate in basically everything they offer at every chance we have, and the school district pays for that out of our dollars, and it doesn't require that you spend your money on those kinds of things, because we feel like that professional development is just as important as it is for our teachers and our staff and everyone else who receives professional development. So it's how we all do the best job that we can. The more information we have, the better off we are. That's how we look at it. So with nothing more from my end, Ms. Fall, I'd ask for potential
At this
adjournment.
moment, we will